I had never thought that a single glance could make the air feel heavier. Yet, the moment I stepped into her apartment office, I felt it like gravity had shifted toward her. She stood behind the desk, leaning just slightly forward, fingers drumming on the worn wood, and the afternoon sunlight painted her hair in streaks of amber. Mid-40s, graceful, poised, but there was a softness in her eyes, a vulnerability I couldn't name yet. "Ah, you're here," she said, her voice low but not unkind. The faintest smile tugged at her lips, like she was keeping a secret just for herself. I wanted to ask what it was, but the words caught in my throat. I was 22, renting the small apartment upstairs, still learning how to walk without tripping over my own thoughts. I noticed everything about her, though: how her fingers brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the subtle sway of her hips when she shifted weight, the way she tilted her head as if measuring something I couldn't see. "Rent can wait," she said, leaning closer. Her hand hovered over a stack of papers, fingers nearly brushing mine. "But you can't." I blinked, my chest tightening, unsure if I'd imagined the heat that pooled there. My hand itched to stay, but I pulled it back, pretending to check my wallet. The office smelled faintly of old wood and something softer, almost like lavender, but warmer, like her. She laughed, a short, quiet sound, and the space between us seemed to shrink. I wanted to step closer, to say something, anything, but the words scattered, falling in pieces around the charged silence. Her eyes found mine again, steady and unflinching. For a moment, I forgot everything else: the letters I had to write, the groceries waiting downstairs, the late afternoon sun outside. There was only her. Her gaze lingered, and I noticed the slight tremor of her fingers as she adjusted a pen on the desk, like she was pretending to be calm. "Do you like it here?" she asked softly, leaning on one elbow. The question seemed casual, but the pause afterward, the way she watched my face, told me it wasn't just about the apartment. "Yes," I managed, voice rougher than I expected. "It feels right." She tilted her head, and I realized how close she actually was. The air between us was thick, almost audible, and I felt my heartbeat in my throat. A strand of her hair brushed my shoulder as she reached for a paper I had dropped. I didn't pull away. "I'm glad," she whispered, "and it wasn't about the rent." Her smile deepened, almost shy, almost teasing. The seconds stretched, every unspoken thought dangling between us. I was aware of the warmth of her presence, the subtle perfume, the quiet strength and the curve of her shoulder as she moved. And then, the office door creaked. Someone else. Or maybe it was just the wind. My pulse spiked, and the tension broke, but not entirely. Her gaze lingered on mine a second too long before she straightened, adjusting her blouse, composing herself like nothing had shifted at all. I swallowed, caught between wanting to speak and wanting to run. And as the shadow of the door edged across the floor, I realized this was just the beginning, just the first moment, charged and fragile, and already impossible to ignore. I kept replaying the moment she smiled at me, the one that made the words in my chest stumble. It wasn't just attraction, it was like stepping into a room that existed only for the two of us. But even as I thought about her, I reminded myself, she was my landlady. She was in her 40s, experienced, confident. And I was barely finding my own rhythm in life, still fumbling over things like rent, bills, and how to act around someone who made my thoughts scatter. I learned a little about her over the next few days. She had been married once, long ago, though the stories she told were measured and careful. There was an elegance in her sadness, a quiet weight she carried that she didn't advertise. I wondered what ghosts lingered behind her smile, what loneliness she had perfected hiding. I, too, had my own quiet voids. Friendships that never lasted, moments I had missed because I was too young to notice. And now, her. My feelings were new, urgent, and impossible to name. We bumped into each other in the hallway that evening. She carried a stack of letters, balancing them as she walked toward her apartment. I stepped aside, but not before our hands brushed, a fleeting contact that lingered in my mind far longer than it should have. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a heartbeat, she didn't look away. Then she adjusted the letters, giving a faint, knowing smile, like she recognized what had passed between us without saying it aloud. There was a tension I couldn't escape. Every glance, every casual conversation, carried an undercurrent I was learning to navigate. I noticed the way her perfume lingered after she left the room, the way she shifted her weight closer to me and then pulled back just enough to keep it forbidden. I caught myself tracing patterns on the desk, imagining her fingers doing the same, daring not to look. It was dangerous. Age, perception, propriety, they were all barriers, invisible but solid. People would whisper if they knew. I shouldn't feel this way. But her nearness made the world tilt differently. Later, she appeared in the doorway to my apartment, holding a small package that had been delivered for me. "I wasn't sure if you'd be home," she said. Her voice brushed against me, warm, intimate, and impossible to ignore. She handed me the box, her fingers lingering on mine, a weight in that touch that neither of us commented on. I met her gaze, and she held it longer than necessary, letting something unspoken pass between us. I wanted to ask her why she stayed so close, why her body seemed to hesitate near mine, why her lips curved just so, teasing a confession she never gave. But I didn't. Instead, I let my hand linger on the package, brushing hers lightly, almost accidentally. She didn't pull away. The moment stretched, charged, fragile, electric. And for a single breath, the hallway disappeared, leaving only the warmth between us. I stepped back, heart hammering, aware that whatever this was, it was becoming something we couldn't ignore. And yet, we both walked away silently, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. The evening was quiet, too quiet, and I could feel the space between us shrinking without either of us saying a word. I was helping her rearrange some boxes in the hallway outside her apartment, just that, in theory. But the brush of her hand against mine as she handed me a stack of papers sent a jolt straight through me. I pretended to adjust my grip on the boxes, but my fingers lingered, catching hers, teasing an electricity neither of us acknowledged. Her gaze met mine. For a moment, it was like the world had paused, and I could almost lean in, almost close the distance, almost kiss her. I felt her breath on my face, soft and warm, and my own heart thumped in a frantic rhythm. Then, the click of the hallway door opening. Her neighbor, a young woman from across the hall, peeked in, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hey! Didn't expect to see you here." "Oh, hi," she said, blinking at our proximity. The moment shattered. Her hand fell back to her side, my fingers twitching where they had brushed hers. We straightened, both guilty and flustered, pretending our closeness was accidental. As the neighbor left, the tension didn't vanish. If anything, it doubled. We exhaled together, quietly, almost in sync, and I realized how much I wanted her, wanted to cross every line I knew I shouldn't. Yet guilt crept in. Thoughts of what others might think, what I should do, all clashed with the magnetic pull between us. She leaned against the doorframe, just slightly, and I noticed the way her shoulder almost brushed mine. My mind screamed at me to step back, but my body betrayed me, inching closer. Her eyes held mine, steady, unflinching, and I could see the same struggle mirrored in them, the desire to cross the line, and the restraint imposed by reason. Our breaths mingled in the thin space between us. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, subtle yet intoxicating, and it made me dizzy with longing. Every heartbeat felt like it was echoing in the quiet hallway, each pause stretching endlessly. You should be careful," she murmured, almost a whisper, almost a plea. There was a tremor in her voice I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to ask her why, wanted to confess that I felt the same way, that I didn't care about careful. But I didn't. I only nodded, swallowing hard, as if that alone could convey all I was feeling. We stood like that for a few seconds longer, closer than ever, yet still restrained. My hand itched to touch her cheek, to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, to close the gap, but we didn't. Instead, we remained on the knife's edge, tethered by our desires and our fears, each silently daring the other to make a move. Finally, she stepped back, just enough to create space, but the electricity didn't dissipate. I could feel it lingering in the air, thick and potent, as though the hallway itself had absorbed the tension between us. And even as we moved away from one another, there was a sense that nothing, not guilt, not propriety, not fear, could truly pull us apart. We were tethered, closer than ever, and neither of us could ignore it. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater, but it felt as though the air itself had thickened around us. I could feel her presence pressing into me, subtle but undeniable. She leaned against the counter, one shoulder brushing mine, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. My hands twitched at my sides, wanting to reach out, to close the space that shouldn't exist yet could not be ignored. I started, then stopped. Words were useless here. My chest thumped so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I can't, her eyes softened but didn't waver. I know, she whispered. She leaned closer, almost imperceptibly, until her hair brushed my cheek. The faint scent of her, something floral, warm, intimate, made my head spin. I swallowed hard, every thought tangled. I wanted to tell her everything I felt, to confess that I couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop noticing the way her lips curved when she was distracted, or how her fingers trembled just slightly when she was nervous. But instead, I kept silent, letting my gaze trace the line of her jaw, the slope of her neck. She moved a fraction closer, her hand brushing against mine on the counter. I didn't pull away. Instead, I felt it, the tiny spark that traveled from our fingertips, the silent acknowledgement of something neither of us dared to name yet. Why do you? Her voice faltered, soft but strained. She tilted her head toward me, and my breath caught. Why do you make it so difficult? I choked on the words, but the truth tumbled out anyway. Because I can't, because I want. My voice dropped, low, raw, and close enough that she could hear every falter. My hand itched to brush a stray lock of hair from her face, to tuck it behind her ear, to feel her warmth against me. Her chest rose and fell against mine as she leaned even closer, eyes locked on mine, and I realized she could feel it too, the tension, the want, the fragile danger between us. My hand finally found hers, fingers intertwining as if that simple contact could steady the storm inside me. And then she whispered, barely audible, "You don't have to fight it." I wanted to lean in, to close the gap that had tormented me for days, to let the world vanish into the press of her body and the scent of her hair. My lips hovered over hers, our breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. But before anything could happen, before the kiss, before the confession that would change everything, there was a sudden noise from the hallway, the echo of a door opening, a footstep. We froze, inches apart, caught between desire and reality, hearts hammering, breaths shallow. The world outside intruded, but for a fleeting second, the space between us felt endless, charged, undeniable. And in that moment, everything shifted. The line we'd been dancing around was no longer imaginary. It was real. I hadn't expected her to mention it, hadn't even imagined she knew. We were in her apartment, the evening light fading behind the curtains, when she suddenly spoke, her voice soft but edged with something sharp. You don't know, do you? Her eyes, wide and unguarded, fixed on mine. Know what? I asked, heart racing, though I already sensed the answer. She bit her lip, a faint tremor in her hand as she rested it on the edge of the desk. That my neighbor overheard us. The hallway. That day. My stomach sank. The memory of that brush of hands, the almost kiss, suddenly felt reckless, exposed. I stepped back instinctively, and our shoulders brushed too closely, sending an unexpected jolt through both of us. She didn't pull away. I didn't mean, I began, but my words stumbled, failing to capture the rush of fear and desire that tangled inside me. Her hand hovered near mine, trembling just enough that I could feel it. It's not just that. She told someone who watches this building. Carefully. You need to understand, this isn't something that can stay hidden forever. I wanted to argue, to insist that the world outside didn't matter, that the way I felt about her was mine alone. But the truth was sharp in my chest. This attraction, this desire, had already slipped past the boundaries we tried to enforce. And now the stakes had shifted. Her gaze softened, but there was a tautness beneath it, like she was measuring how far she could lean in without falling. I noticed the small quiver of her fingers as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her shoulder brushed mine again as if drawn despite caution. My own hands ached to reach for her, to hold her, to feel the warmth of her body pressed against mine, but everything now carried risk. I didn't know, I admitted, my voice low, shaking slightly. You can't pretend it's simple anymore, she said, stepping just a fraction closer. Our knees brushed, my pulse spiked. Nothing about this is simple. Her words, her nearness, the subtle pressure of her hand against mine ignited something undeniable. Desire and fear collided in my chest. Every fiber of me wanted her, but the thought of consequences clawed at the edges of my resolve. We stood there, inches apart, the room suddenly smaller, the air charged. I felt her breath, light and warm, near my ear. The trembling of her hand echoed the tremor I knew I felt in my own. And then, in that perfect storm of want and danger, she made a choice, stepping closer, brushing past me just enough that the world outside didn't exist. It was a silent decision, wordless but unyielding. And in that step, I realized that nothing fear, guilt, propriety could truly hold us back now. We were on the edge, closer than ever, and the next move would change everything. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the fading light pooling in corners where shadows whispered secrets we didn't dare speak. We stood close, closer than I had ever imagined, her body just a breath away from mine. Every nerve in me thrummed, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. I could feel the warmth of her shoulder, the soft press of her hand against mine, the subtle tilt of her head as if she were reading the storm in my chest. I started, voice hoarse, words tangling in my throat. I don't want. I can't. She held up a finger, stopping me mid-rush. Shoo, she whispered. Her breath grazed my cheek, warm and intimate. The tremor in her voice mirrored the one I felt in my own hands. Stop talking. Just feel it. And I did. Every ounce of hesitation, every rule, every fear of judgment dissolved in the gravity of her presence. My hand itched to curl around hers, to hold her close, to steady myself and her at once. Her fingers brushed mine again, tentatively, testing the line, and I didn't pull away. For a long, suspended moment, we simply existed there, inches apart, eyes locked, breaths mingling. Her hair brushed against my forehead, and I realized I was holding my breath, terrified of breaking the fragile tension, terrified that stepping forward would ruin everything, or that stepping back would cost us something neither of us could forgive. I don't care, she whispered, voice low, trembling slightly. Not about the rules. Not about anyone else. Something in me shifted. The fear that had tethered me snapped under the weight of wanting her, of needing her in this quiet, human, undeniable way. I reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, letting my fingers linger at the curve of her jaw. She leaned into my touch, and the smallest sigh escaped her lips, a sound that made my chest tighten and my knees feel weak. You feel the same, she said, barely audible, as though even whispering it aloud was a confession we were daring the world to overhear. I can't stop, I admitted. I want you. Her eyes glimmered, a mixture of relief, desire, and something I could only describe as recognition. Then don't, she breathed. Then stay. Don't run from it. And in that instant, I made the choice. Not because it was easy, not because the world outside had changed, but because in that small, charged space, between trembling hands and stolen breaths, I knew that denying her, denying us, would be impossible. We didn't rush, didn't need a grand gesture. We simply leaned into the closeness, allowing the silence to speak what words never could. Every shiver, every brush of skin against skin, every shared heartbeat became our declaration. Messy. Fragile. Human. Perfectly ours. When we finally pulled back just slightly, enough to see each other fully, I could read it all in her eyes, trust, desire, understanding. And in mine, she saw the same. We didn't need more than that. We understood each other completely now. For the first time, nothing between us felt impossible. The apartment was quiet now, the city outside dimming into evening shadows, but it no longer felt small or confining. It felt safe. It felt like ours. We sat together on the edge of the couch, knees brushing, hands entwined in the simple, effortless way that only comes after barriers have been dropped. I could feel her warmth through my fingers, steady and reassuring, and the faint scent of her hair, still lingering after hours of proximity, filled the space between us. She leaned her head against my shoulder, soft and unguarded. I rested my cheek lightly against hers, careful not to crush the delicate balance, careful only to exist in the moment. We didn't need words, the long silence spoke volumes. Every tremor of her hand in mine, every quiet sigh, every subtle exhale carried the truth we'd both been too hesitant to admit. I was afraid, she murmured finally, voice low, almost shy. Of everything. Judgments, the age difference, losing myself in this. I tightened my grip slightly, brushing my thumb across her knuckles. Me too, I admitted. I didn't think it could ever be like this, simple or real. But it is. Her lips curved into a faint smile, eyes closing as she pressed her forehead against mine. Then it is, she whispered. We make it real. I leaned in, brushing a soft kiss against her temple, letting it linger there, warm and tender. She shivered lightly, and I realized that every hesitation, every stolen glance, every unspoken thought had led us here not to perfection, but to something far better, understanding. We didn't rush into grand declarations or dramatic gestures. We simply stayed close, letting the closeness speak for itself. Her fingers intertwined with mine, her warmth pressed against my side, our breaths synchronizing in quiet harmony. The space between us no longer existed, except as a gentle reminder of the journey we had taken. Every pause, every near touch, every moment of tension had built toward this. And as we settled there, side by side, the apartment bathed in the soft glow of the evening, the world outside seemed distant and unimportant. There were no fears left to voice, no doubts left to chase. We had chosen each other, fully, deliberately, and the weight of that choice felt freeing, exhilarating, and utterly human. I pressed one last, soft kiss to her hair, and she tilted her head up just slightly, eyes meeting mine in quiet affirmation. A long, warm hug followed, the kind that wraps around more than the body, it wraps around the heart, the soul, and every unspoken word between us. We stayed like that, in that small, perfect space, until the night settled completely. Together, finally. And now, dear listener, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?